A very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for joining. And a big thank you to Hazel and Harriet as well for their introductions. I will talk you a little bit through expanded interiors because this exhibition is sort of based on it, but I won't go into too many details. So if you have questions, please do ask later on. But I was lucky enough in 2008 to be an Abbey Fellow at the British School at Rome, and that allowed me to go to these wonderful, beautiful Roman sites at the Bay of Naples, Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Oplontis, and Villa in Stabei. And I was really struck then how fresh the wall paintings seemed to me and how contemporary, and they seemed very significant for artists, so I thought. And what struck me in particular was how complex they were and how they, if you get a house which has the decoration of one workshop or so, how complex these works are, how they negotiate or choreograph the houses in terms of private or public space, interior, exterior, also the role and functions of rooms, but also how they take into account imagined and the real architecture and play with it, and volumes of space and light and shadows. So I thought it was really incredible, and it started me sort of on a journey where I first did a succession of exhibitions in different spaces, but I also started a conversation in my head first, and which then later on went out on paper, a fictional conversation between a Roman wall painter, an anonymous woman Roman wall painter, and first Lisitsky, the Russian avant-garde artist, and later Kurt Schwitters as well. And they're discussing their practice because they're all really working very interestingly with interior spaces. Then, however, I felt like to really learn more about Roman wall painting and find out more, one should really look at specific houses and specific decorations. And that was, oops, continue. Oops, that was when I sort of initiated the Expanded Interiors project. Here you see some images from the beautiful Villa di Mistri in Pompeii. These are the two sites, Pompeii and Herculaneum, which in the end I then chose to work with. And I initiated this project bringing together archaeologists, Professor Ian Haynes, Dr. Tiara Vasi and Alex Turner, and also Rosie Morris. She worked as a research assistant on the Expanded Interiors project and was so really hands-on involved with all the research and very familiar with the houses. And as you know, Rosie has now done a really beautiful commission, her own response to the research, which is really exciting. I wanted to show you quickly the houses we worked with. This is the Casa del Criptoportico in Pompeii, second style Roman wall painting, which deals with very, very differently with perspective in different rooms. I will talk about this more later on. And then also in Herculaneum, the House of the Beautiful Courtyard, which is a sort of late third and early fourth style in parts decorated house, and which also works really beautiful with the volumes of space and sort of temperature of color. And I won't show you the installations yet. I will show them while we are sort of going through the exhibition. And what we did for the Expanded Interiors restaged is that we took also quotes from this fictional conversation from the Roman wall painter to kind of frame the whole of the exhibition. And the first one is sort of, for me, a kind of key quote. So the Roman wall painter says, "As I said, the magic lay in the balance between imagined and physical architecture, in the way in which wall paintings immerse the viewer in her or his surroundings. Nor should you think in terms of an individual room. Our wall painting reflected the role and function, or the differing roles and functions of the various rooms in which they appeared. They formed a system that shaped and articulated the Roman house. Our wall paintings structured the house, making it navigable and understandable for visitors. Our works were much, much more than panel paintings. And on this note, I would like to hand over to Rosie to talk about her beautiful commission.
Thanks so much, Catrin. I'm going to share my screen. I might just mention as well, oh no, I think it's fine, but I think if anyone's got their microphones turned up, that'd be turned on, it would be good to turn them off, please. Thank you. Thanks, it's lovely to see you all. And thanks, Harriet and Hazel, for the brilliant introduction, and Catrin. Right, let me find my screen. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so following on from, as Catrin's just really beautifully introduced that first quote from the fictional conversation, we've included the extracts from the conversation in the interpretive text around the exhibition walls. So this is the text in my space. And just to tell you a really quick snippet about what I'm interested in my practice on the whole, I'm interested in specific architectures and environments and how those specific spaces make us feel. And what I'm going to try and do, because I'm just going to try and do this in 15 minutes, is take you on a whistle-stop tour through my inspirations in Pompeii and Herculaneum and Villa Pontus. And then also kind of more wider influences, and take on a little tour around the installation that I've put together. So I'm going to transport you to Pompeii. This is the Casa de Crypto Portico, the house of the Cryptoporticus, which is an underground passageway. And what I want to draw your attention to is the use of rhythm and repetition for a space that you're supposed to move through and around in these corridors. And then again in Villa Pontus, again, you're seeing this kind of use of rhythm in the wall paintings. And I absolutely loved these kind of scratchy zigzag zebra striped paintings that were on the corridors around the villa, whereas in the houses, in the rooms adjoining the corridors, they were very richly decorated, very elaborate, and quite ornate and colourful in comparison to this black and white abstract work, which I found really contemporary and really fun. And for me, it kind of there's a lot of contemporary references of like Sol LeWitt and Daniel Buren, artists that are potentially referencing this sort of work now. And then back to Pompeii. This is one of the bathroom spaces that leads off from this corridor, which Catrin's just shown an image of. And as you can see, the treatment of the space, because it's space to hold you in and in which you stay relatively still, is very different to those moving spaces. There's use of trompe-l'oeil to extend the architecture, to create ideas of interior furnishings, and to create ideas of sort of scenic vistas beyond the space. And in the friezes around the colonnades and the corridor spaces, I kind of was really intrigued by these mythological narratives that ran around the walls, and how each one individually was this quite intriguing, almost surrealist diorama within the space. And of course, all over ancient Rome, there's incredible mosaic floors. This is one from the Casa de Crypto Portico again. And I'm really intrigued by how each one is kind of given a boundary line, kind of boxed or encased. And in particular, the doorways or the thresholds, those in-between spaces, are also given a boundary line around them. And then over to Herculaneum, we come in. I really love the theatre of this space. It's very dramatic choreography by the architects and the wall painters. You come into this relatively small kitchen domestic space where we're made to feel quite big in relation to it. You're tunneled through, going down into this sort of quite dark corridor passage and into this really light-filled atrium space, which is quite a cool colour palette. And then off from that is this huge kind of banqueting room, which is 5 metre high ceiling with a very warm colour palette as a contrast. And then moving to the Villa de Mistri, which is of course amazing for so many reasons, but I really love these really small study rooms and the sort of seductive dark black paintings, which felt really rich with so many more colours than black within them, and how kind of quiet and contemplative these spaces felt, and very kind of sophisticated. So then bringing you back to Newcastle, and I was and being given this commission, really trying to question, how do I insert that context from ancient Rome into the Hatton Gallery? And my work's generally incredibly site responsive. I kind of try and work to mirror the space and deconstruct all the elements within it and reassemble them in a new way. And here I am kind of inserting a new context into it, which is quite different to me. And I want to sort of draw some comparisons out between the entrance space, which is very bright and very grand in its architectural detailing and design, and also the new Hatton space. You can hear somebody trying to concentrate. The new Hatton entranceway, which is 3 floors high, and again really light filled and like a kind of glass box, and trying to again create a theatre, or to think about the kind of flow through the space, as mine's the first one that we have to go through because of the pandemic. And then I knew that the next space you're going to go into, where Catrin's work is going to be with what I knew in our conversations was going to be a relatively cool colour palette, was also going to have this quite grand architectural detailing in it, and quite a cool easterly natural light coming through. And again, I'm trying to think about our journey through Newcastle and into the space, and started to document, as well as the Hattons, the immediate Hatton tiling on the floor and the architecture there, but there's a lot of thresholds in and around Newcastle. If you look to kind of Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian architecture around Pilgrim Street and Grey Street and those sorts of places, which of course relates back to ancient Rome and this kind of classical designs. So yeah, I'm trying to play between this idea of moving and stopping, and warmth and coolness of colour temperature, and between light and dark, and grandeur and perhaps domestic as something opposing that. So I'm going to start introducing my work, take you on a little tour around it, but Catrin and I, an interpretive leaflet, wrote a kind of playful piece of written text to accompany it, and mine starts, dancing diamond dashes delineate your flow. So this kind of idea of stopping and starting, ready, steady, stop, I think I've written. And then you're presented with this view, which is hopefully quite a warm and welcoming interior to hold you in, with quite domestic architectural features, and to take you around it and try to explain what you're seeing. On the walls, you've got these hung paper panels, which are about 2.5 meters wide, which are printed, digitally printed pastel drawings, such as this, that have been enlarged to a huge scale. So this one is about 45 centimeters high by about 65 centimeters wide, and then it's been enlarged to 4 meters high and about 8 meters wide. And this is a photograph of it, whereas the scans were kind of done at 3000 dpi. And I wanted to include this to show the kind of happy accident of the light falling onto it on the right of the image. And initially I was trying to create a really dark space, and was trying to open out black. So take a black and all the colours within it through the yellows and into a white. And I was really struggling with the muddiness of that colour, and it became, through kind of opening it out and mixing colours with the pastels, it became quite warm. And I was also in conversation with Catrin and aware of the palette of the next space. So it's become quite a red interior as you go through. Click, oh, there we go. And that's the elevation as you look into the space, which is actually divided in two. I'll explain a bit more about what's going through my head in drawing this in a minute. And then that's the elevation on the right, which you can see I've kind of folded and cut out to play with the printed flatness against this kind of initial three-dimensionality. And what you're seeing on these, or what I'm kind of imagining, is a sense of the light spilling around the space. And I've got a slide after this to tell you more about that, but this is also showing you the detail of, there's a pink ground in the pastel paper that's coming through, and which becomes quite a focal point of the work, becomes a very intentional part of the work, showing the texture of a potential wall surface. The paper itself is quite fibrous, so it allows the chalkiness of the pastel to come through. Yeah, and kind of plays around with scale. And then this is a kind of initial sketch, a few versions before what you're seeing in the final installation. But if you imagine a kind of expanded net that you would fold up again and make the cube of the gallery space, on the left wall, imagining the artworks being kind of windows that would spill their light as the sun comes up and rises from east to west around the space onto the walls. So it's a kind of playful interpretation of, what if these openings on the left were real? What would the sun do around the space? And this door kind of spilling its light onto this wall as well on the left, if you can see my cursor. And then I'll take you around the works in a bit more detail. So this one, I don't need to say too much about. It's called Curtains. It is Curtains. It's playing on this idea of illusion, and which of course there's so much from Roman wall painting, but also this idea of a screen and what's behind it and what's outside. And it's a very domestic image of curtains in my bedroom at home, that I've kind of inserted into this quite large space to try and create a sense of relativity to the body, and also playing with the structure, the physical structure of a canvas and a stretcher, and kind of merging that with the band across a window, a casement window, with the fact that there's a stretch bar behind it, and playing around with the materiality and the physicality of it. And it's floating, it's kind of hung from the ceiling, so it's sort of floating away from the wall, which the walls are doing as well. They're floating away from the wall, and the idea of that is to point towards, it's not a wall painting, it's not on the wall and trying to be the wall, it's covering it, and so it makes you aware that something's behind it and hopefully points you back to the space itself, like a kind of veil. And then I'm going to take you down, so now we're about 40 to 50 centimeters off the ground, so we're child height, and this is a small diorama box that I've made, which has got a kind of mirrored play on extension of depth. And to be honest, this idea is borrowed from Hall McKnight Architects, who did this fantastic installation in Venice Architecture Biennale, which, as you can see, asked people to crouch down and walk around. And they did these really interesting kind of boxes, playing around with light and extensions of space that I wanted to play on. And initially I was thinking, okay, what if you cut a hole through that wall? There are no windows in space. What if I cut a hole through and make a window? What can we see? And thinking back to that old Hatton opening, you would see kind of the staircases and kind of through maybe towards the door. And so trying to get an idea of that perspective and what you would see. And at the same time, I was reading a text by Catrin Huber, who's a curator who's now based in Edinburgh and writes a lot on Leonora Carrington's paintings. And she writes on the kind of feminist symbolism in these paintings, the kind of dollhouse miniature influence from Victoria miniature dolls houses, and that these spaces are, you know, domestic, behind the scenes spaces that were occupied by women and children. They weren't the kind of public view for the household. And there's also a few nods to kind of childhood and yeah, open doors, rocking horses, things like that. So I was really intrigued by reading that text and wanted to, I guess, borrow a bit of those ideas and that symbolism into, I had a baby 2 years ago, which is around the same time. I think this project's maybe been in inception for about 2.5 years. So everything's kind of got jumbled together, and absolutely my own domestic life, my own private life has had an impact on the work. And so this was sort of an opportunity to play with what I was thinking through about my relationship to being a parent, and also my own childhood in this work. So you're sort of seeing an open door and a kind of architectural opening in the ceiling, which relates to some of the Hatton architecture as well as the staircases. And then there's a tree root and a kind of concrete floor and a rocking horse in the background. I need to go on to the next slide. Okay, so moving you along the wall, there's an image that just has been imprinted in my retina, I think, for the last 2 years, where I've been sat in a dark room trying to get my little lad to sleep. And so I've just been kind of sketching this image recurrently, and then I decided to photograph it. And the idea was initially to make a print of this, an abstracted print of this, and then decided, you know what, I'm really happy with the photograph. I don't want to improve it or change it. And so this became something I wanted to include in the installation to play with scale, and also the idea of these different portals into other spaces, and to put on top of this slither of light that is coming through, that's the idea of it being spilled from the doorway. And I guess I'm trying to, you know, shatter the illusion that that's light being spilled through the doorway, and to show you the surface and the flatness of that hung piece of paper, and also that kind of self-reflexive thing of putting something back onto the thing itself, and that sort of cyclical nod to the source. And then on the opposing wall, you'll see a fireplace. And I'm trying to weight the space in some ways, and to create a balance and create a flow, so you walk around it and it doesn't just become a corridor. But also, I think fireplaces are really interesting in domestic interiors, and I've done a little bit of research around that use and the etymology of the word fire, which comes from foci, Latin for focus, and how it's an area around which we would gather to tell stories, that we have to give our focus to attend to it in order to maintain it, but also to, you know, we're kind of drawn to look at it. And I think they kind of hold quite an interesting, almost like a psychological function in weighting and anchoring a space. And I think this space felt like it needed an anchor. And interestingly, when we were talking through initial plans for the installation, Harriet brought up that in the First World War, when this space was used as a hospital, they'd inserted the facade of a fireplace, which I thought was quite interesting, and trying to sort of break down that public feel of it into something a bit more familiar. And then on the wall behind you, to continue these dancing diamond dashes up through the wall, I've extended them, and there is a filmic piece of work that's 3 minutes, where essentially the light from the curtains that are kind of circling around the space is dancing from the left to the right and down to the bottom of the wall. And I call this this is almost like splitting or slicing the space. And I want this to be a reveal that you don't necessarily see in first glance. You walk around the space and then you look back and everything's changed. And I guess as well, it's a comment on how perspectives have perhaps shifted over the last couple of years. And yeah, that's all from me. I'm going to pass back to Catrin. Thank you all for listening. Stop.
Thank you, Rosie. That was really super interesting. It's fantastic also to see some work in progress and drawings and all the thoughts behind the process and the development of the installation. Thank you. So imagine you don't need to imagine, you've just been in Rosie's installation, and then you walk through into the next space. And again, we are back with the fictional conversations, and I chose this one for this space because for me, time is quite an important element within that space. I'm going to read it. A recurrent motive such as that of closed doors could be read as the threshold between this world and the next, the tomb a sacred place. Thus, the real, the here and now was connected to metaphysical worlds, evoking past, present, and future, and the eternal. So when I did the fictional conversation, I did a lot of research on Roman wall painting, and there is one scholar, Morris Owen, and he writes a lot about false doors within Roman wall paintings, and he has the theory that they connect the present with the past, with the ancestors. And I love this idea of these wall paintings being thresholds between times, between worlds. And as I said earlier, this sort of fictional and real architecture. Now you come from Rosie's space, and first you see the back of the painting installation, which for me was quite important because it offers a really completely different approach to the installation than it had in Pompeii, but also to show the sort of marks and traces of the journey of that installation. And yeah, you see the tape and paint and some scribbles of I've put on there. So this, I wanted this installation to really cut through this beautiful light-filled Edwardian space, and you approach it from the back and then turn around. So it's also about how you move through the space. And the painting itself is very much a sort of succession of opened and closed spaces to pull you in and pull you out. And at times it almost collapses in itself as well. Color has been really important. So the color sort of, I play through different roles and functions of color within the space. And it's all in a way done so to pull you along, to make you move around. And that was something, I mean, Rosie talked a little bit already about it, as something which was also the function of this beautiful painted colonnade in the Cryptoporticus, and which was opposite. And my installation was very much developed in dialogue to this wall painting. And I love that it looks very rhythmical. You have to imagine that I take my cursor here at the top was a frieze as well, a sort of a continuous Trojan frieze. So one painting sort of next to the other seamlessly. And this sort of rhythm in this space looks at first sight to be really regular and symmetrical. And that's sort of what a lot of the theory says about second style Roman wall painting. But actually, if you look at it, it's really extremely irregular, which makes total sense as an artist, because it's like 68 meters long. And if it was symmetrical, it would be actually rather boring. And so there's a real groove to that wall painting, which I was really fascinated in. And I was talking earlier about perspective. I mean, this house was not the whole house. This is only the sort of underground passageway, but those rooms were surely developed by the same workshop. I mean, you hear I sort of pick up the same work of the colonnade, but this room here, it ends in this room here, which was the dining room. And it's not, that is actually not there anymore. That's currently restored. But you see here, this is a snippet on the left-hand side, that the color scheme was almost inverted. So here the herms and the pillars are yellow, and the background is caput mortuum. And here then the main bit becomes yellow, and no, it's not a frieze, but the top section is caput mortuum and has these sort of still images. So it's much more about staying in the space. The coyotes here, they stand in front of, so that there is more of a physical space. And then when you move on into the bathroom, you've got the really multi-perspectival space. So I was really interested in picking up that rhythm and irregularity and that playful approach to dealing with the function of walking around through that space to get to where you want to. So this is how the installation was originally shown so very much opposite, and I wanted to kind of counteract the sort of warmth colors, but picking up the cool colors from the frieze in this installation. And I mentioned already colors as important, and but I wanted to work particularly with black because, or celebrate the color black, because I think it's really sumptuously used within Roman wall paintings. And here within Roman wall painting, it has a really interesting way of working with different surface qualities. So I worked here as well with a sort of acrylic varnish as well as with very matte colors. So you get so the varnish also works a bit as a mirror, which I quite liked. So sort of throwing back the environment to you, like the aluminium itself. In parts you see sort of aluminium bits. But it also has these different tones and different temperatures of black, which I was really interested in. For me, it was nice also here, actually, this is photographed with a flashlight. This corner I did really high in contrast because it was quite a shadowy corner, and it's quite nice to see now at the Hatton, it's kind of reverse. It's the whole installation is reverse. It's like the most light-filled bit of the whole installation. And I kind of really love how it really changes the color, or how you read the work, for me at least. Anyway, on the work you've probably seen are these objects, and they are 3D printed Roman face cups. So when we were in Italy, we had the wonderful opportunity to go into the storerooms in Pompeii and Herculaneum. And originally, I actually thought I used the objects which were found in the house, the Casa di Crypto Porticum. And we investigated and looked at the object, and I have to admit, I wasn't that thrilled. I mean, they're great objects, but it just didn't quite make sense to integrate them into the work. And when I was in the storerooms, I saw these cups and I knew, yes, that's it. They need to be in there. I loved how humane they are, how humorous and fun. And I felt, I mean, they are terracotta and they look like they could be contemporary. And they looked equally fresh. I mean, they were absolutely perfect. And so I decided to use these different face cups. And here you can see sort of, so we as well, we 3D scanned the original objects. And then Alex created these models, and we 3D printed them. And yeah, and I wanted to integrate them into the wall paintings also a bit as a response to some of the really, I mean, in a way, this colonnade is quite abstract how it runs. And then it has this story, which unfortunately is, most of it is, the Trojan frieze is destroyed. However, it has also these incredibly beautifully painted faces of Herms. So that's a detail from the first wing of the Cryptoporticus. And they're just so, yeah, expressive. And I felt that the cups kind of quite nicely took up that conversation. Now, for me, it's really nice to, yeah, to have the, as I said, sort of this reflection in the work of the Hatton. And for me, it's very much, I'm really interested in how you can activate walls, how you can sort of bring them to life and maybe communicate with each other. Here again, we sort of walked through the space from one side, coming in from Rosie's space along this side, and we are sort of at the back of the installation. And I like, actually, I have to say that it kind of, it almost, someone said to me, it looks like a shipping container. I quite like that image. I think it has sort of something quite brutal, but then because it's aluminium, it also sort of reflects, if blurrily, the architecture. And I like that play of, it having something quite sort of fine in terms of color if you close there, but it's also kind of quite brutal. This leads you then on to the next space, which is called the corner escape. And so from the sort of cool and light-filled gallery into this room within a room, again, I wanted the installation placed so that it's almost into your face, but that it also reflects the room behind. So, and that you get these sort of layers of colors and light and shadows, and then these corners opening up on things happening in corners. I'm very interested in corners, actually. And here again, the text from the Roman wall painter is like, this impacts on you, the viewer, physically. Imagine being immersed in these paintings. We realize them in such a way that the viewing inhabitants' animated and imagined environment, they themselves constituting a missing link in the chain. And I want to bring you to this little wall painting here in the corner, which you see on the left-hand side here, which is also in a response, because in quite a few Roman wall paintings, they activate the corners really interesting. So I wanted to do something with that and play with positive and negative space and with a sort of shifting perspective as you move through the space of the work, because you have to imagine this is the edge of the corner. And I wanted to show you a little bit of the process of the work. So this is a bit, yeah, a view of my process, but it's also a preview, because it's also, I'm out of making these works because I played through many different variations. I also created a slideshow. So this is an extract from the slideshow, which I want to have as a piece in another exhibition, hopefully. And within the work, I also, I mean, hence, this was on a gray wall. I also wanted to really activate the color white and not always having white as this sort of default background color, but really activating it in this wallpaper, but also then in the room within the room. So I'll double check the time. I'm not doing too badly yet. So I'll take you through a little slideshow, but it's also sort of the different variation I've been thinking through. I hope that my wireless gives the right speed. And then we're kind of, back to the installation. So you kind of, in this space, you kind of walk around. So very sort of a different movement. And again, you see a lot of the sort of history of the work on these outside aluminium panels. Now, originally, this bathroom was aligned with the really beautiful bathroom, which I showed earlier, and also Rosie showed in her presentation, in the Cryptoporticus, which is the side sort of from what is still remaining, the sort of culmination. And, you know, as I said, you have the colonnade, a very sort of flat, rhythmical approach to perspective. Then you have the dining room, which opens up the space. And then the bathroom is really this wonderful play between inside and outside space, private and public, mundane and profane. And yeah, and it's sort of has these warm inside spaces, but then also the sort of cooler outside skies coming in. What is amazing in this work, and there was a different research project on it as well, is how this wall painting combines multiple perspectival viewpoints so as to really wrap the painting around the viewer, making it sort of almost like an embodied perspective, which makes you feel you're the right size for the space, which with a one-point perspective, it wouldn't be. And I love that sort of creative approach. It's not understanding perspective, it's actually using it in a very, very humane way, I would argue. Anyway, so for my piece, I wanted this to be really intense, and it sort of combines very different viewpoints and perspectival viewpoints, but I wanted it almost get at you and to be. So actually, this wall at the end, in terms of perspective, is coming at you actually. Sorry, I'm missing a word. Instead of sort of receding, and so it plays also with yeah, again, how to work with the different corners and to open up corners or to disguise corners within the work, and with sort of positive and negative space. So it's meant to be quite disorientating and pretty full on, and it has, opposed to the first installation, much more sort of centrifugal movement around the space. And you see here, that's the installation in Pompeii, again in the House of the Cryptoporticos. And yeah, the colors look quite differently in the daylight. And also you weren't aware, you didn't see the backside. It was really sort of creating a room in a succession of other rooms. I use, when working, I think as many artists, I use quite models quite a lot. And so in developing this piece for Herculaneum, I really played around with cardboard, with drawings, and yeah, made these sort of quite low-tech models, but they really helped me to visualize the installations and to develop them. And I use also models to sort of plan the exhibition. And this is one of that room at the Hatton Gallery. And as you can see, I originally thought that the corner escape piece, the wallpaper, would be massive over one corner and very large. But I had that on, and I just felt it would be too intense. And I felt those two works would perhaps, would perhaps sort of elbow each other out. So in the end, I decided to have it much smaller. And as you can see here, again, it was this idea of that you really are aware of the massive physicality as well of that room within a room within a room. Now, okay. Now, as you walk through the Hatton, you also get, of course, to the wonderful Märzbahnwall. And as I mentioned before in this fictional conversation, it's a woman Roman wall painter talking to first Alice Sitzky, but then later on, so I'm changing this since many years, this conversation, but later on Kurt Schwitters is joining. And so this is a quote from him, which is, I find also thinking about his work really important. So he says here, well, the fictional Schwitter says, the Märzbar was complicated and complex, and it evolved and transformed continuously. It was a way of living. It helped me to think things through, to experiment with ideas. It existed. It didn't need to propagate change. It was play, 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 the only sensible state of being. I was actually sneakily, I have introduced here as well some images from an exhibition I had at the Hatton in 2013, where I was allowed to create a temporary home, new home for Schwitters. As you can see, I was already very influenced from Roman wall paintings. That's the succession of exhibitions I was doing to actually sort of get my head around why I find it so interesting. And I loved working with the Schwitters. I mean, I think Schwitters is a fantastic artist anyway, but then also having this dislocated fragment of a site-specific work in the Hatton in a space which we haven't got like this anymore because the Hatton has been renovated. But I love that space as well because it was so idiosyncratic. And I just loved having the opportunity to integrate his work with that in exhibition. And I did collages as well, but very different photographic and digital collages. And yeah, played with the color red. as you can see. And as I said, for me, it was very much bringing out these idiosyncratic features of the Hatton, like the waffle ceiling, but also having this dialogue with Schwitters. The exhibition was called As Above, So Below, which comes from alchemy, from Trismegistus, from the emerald tablets. Sorry, I wanted to say green emerald, no, the emerald tablets. And it referred to the relationship between metals on Earth and the planets. So the sun was meant to be gold, and the moon silver, Mercury, and so on. And I was interested in that very much in terms of architecture, as well as how I'm in this sort of micro-macro relationship of architecture to ideas of the cosmos. The last room, Light Trap, I'm taking you through to the sort of last restaged installation. I won't go into the quote as yet, but talk you through. You've got here a construction, a sort of scaffolding-like construction, which brings brings together Roman women out of different contexts, and also a La, who appears a few times up here and down there, who was a protector of the household. And this is this sort of construction in the original space at the Casa del Cortile, in this massive, beautiful reception room that we were talking about earlier. And I mean, as you see, the sort of wall painting went around the space, and there was no way I could integrate any wall painting on the wall. And the floor has an original mosaic floor, and there were only a few areas which were damaged, and the installation had to be on those bits of contemporary plaster and or concrete. And for me, I wanted this relationship to the wall paintings. And here, this is a sort of late third style Roman wall painting you've got, with these drawings, which actually Mayuri, who was the archaeologist who excavated the house, and his team, and they kind of extended what was remaining of the wall painting, how they thought that was sort of fulfilling. And I quite like that aspect, that they kind of brought in their ideas or their theories with their own drawings into that space. And what I like here, different to the sort of second style we've seen at the Casa del Crypto Portico, is that it's again an architectural drawing structures the whole space, but here the elements are much more ornamental and a lot flatter. The suggested space is a lot flatter, and it has, not in many spaces, but it has also these objects here, like for example this little chalice, which seem to sit right between the sort of painted space and the real space of the reception room at the House of the Beautiful Courtyard. And so I wanted to work with the objects also in such a way that they're really sort of coming at you and are quite like these printed panels, that they're sort of quite not into your face, but sort of quite sort of protruding, sort of, or become themselves like borders between a space in front of and behind, so kind of disguising and revealing. The installation is called Bella Ciao, so I quite brutally sort of collaged these letters into the drawings. And the Bella Ciao is an Italian resistance song, or it was sung as a resistance songs against the fascists in the Second World War. And for me, it was quite important to bring that in as a sort of hint, or as a, how should I say, to refer to the sort of framing of the site. And the original exhibition was shown as part also of the Mayuri pop-up festival, and Mayuri, Amedeo Mayuri, was the archaeologist who was the director of the site, I think from 1927 or so, or maybe earlier, maybe I'm mixing it up, but no, from 1927 they started excavating the site. Before that it was modern Ercolano. And so they excavated the site, which was amazing because it was covered by 20 meters of lava and rocks, lava rocks, but what for me kind of, I wanted to refer to the fact that Mayuri, I mean, he did amazing work with excavation the site, but he benefited very much also from the fact that the fascist government at the time really wanted to sort of highlight the glorious Roman past for their own sort of propaganda purposes. And so that kind of how that feeds in for me was important to be in, but also to playful on that it's mainly women like Ciao within the installation. Amedeo Mayuri was also really interesting because he, I mean, he was a really interesting character in terms of what he did with finds in the excavations. He really framed the site also in terms of stories and narration and storytelling. So he for example, put a loom from one house next to the bed, found bed in another house, and then the house was called the house of the weaving girl. So Roman everyday life closer to the people through telling stories, which is perhaps quite an unorthodox approach for archaeologists, but as a curator, I think as a curatorial approach, it's quite interesting. And he used this particular space actually also to bring objects from all over the site together of everyday life as an exhibition space. So it was really quite, for me, it was important also to refer to that history with Bella Ciao. Okay, so here is the objects are sort of a variety. Like this is a wooden portrait of a woman. We know that because she has a beautiful bun at the back. It's not quite clear what the original figure was. It might have been a portrait of an ancestor, but there's a theory that it was also a decoration of furniture, and I quite like to kind of really get these objects out of their context. Here you see Alex in action, scanning the original, and also Herculaneum has a lot of these really extraordinary wooden objects because unlike Pompeii, which was unfortunate because all the wind went in the direction of Pompeii and it was bombarded with rocks, but Herculaneum was a lot closer. So the pyroclastic surge, which was temperatures up to 400 degrees for Herculaneum, was a lot higher than in Pompeii. It was very high in Pompeii as well, but much higher in Herculaneum, and that meant that on the one hand that everyone died, but it also meant that in the wood or in the organic material, any moist instantly dried out, and that helped the carbonization of the wood. And that's why we have these really rare wooden objects, 2,000-year-old wooden objects. And another one of the other figures was Livia. There's a really beautiful silver bust of Livia, the wife of Augustus. So she was like, about her, there's a lot known, this really powerful woman, and I like that they are all sort of brought together in an installation and very much out of context, but they all more or less have to do with the house, which I think is quite interesting as well, having been shown in a Roman house in Pompeii. That's an Isis Lactan, which is an Egyptian goddess, and would have been found as well on a Roman altar together with deities of various origins. And I find that she's a very sort of powerful image of breastfeeding, more powerful or empowered, one should say, than maybe the sort of Madonna images which followed on, and clearly picking up on that sort of image of Isis lactans. Relocating the work to, I mean, I'm very curious about seeing this work outside of the context of the Casa de House of the Beautiful Courtyard, but I also wanted it to anchor it to the walls again, because for me it's very much in a way in conversation with the walls, and there was not enough time for a wall painting to create a wall painting. And so I was always thinking of all these spaces together, how you move through the exhibition, and sort of you start in a sort of a very warm space like Rosie's space, you go through the cool space of the Edwardian Gallery, Gallery 1, then you come in again a very sort of a contained and colorful red space, and then through the Schwitters into this one, and I wanted to keep it relatively black and white. But I also wanted to really, because I had the wallpaper in with the corner escape, with that sort of room within a room, I wanted to again activate the walls, but with a different material and with something very physical and sumptuous, and working with surface texture. So I created these wall hangings. This is a very small one. To start with, it's sort of different warm velvet, gray, silver, actually silver fabrics. The first one, I should actually jump a bit. This is a little mock-up I did for the black one. So the first one I did was actually this black one, this mock-up. So I did drawings separately, which I then thought, yes, I want to have them as wall hangings. Then I looked and I got lots of fabric samples and wanted something that really, different fabrics, very differently, textures that reacting to light differently. And then I didn't sew this large one myself. That was a really fantastic seamstress, Ruth van Steenis, and I provided her with the fabric and with the drawings. And for me, it was really, I know she did a really fantastic job sort of scaling that up. And this, I wanted to sort of raise the attention to this fabric here, because this is the same fabric as this one, as this one, as this one, and the shadows at the top as well. But I wanted her to attach it in really different grain directions. And so when you actually move along, it changes massively. So sometimes this part is really light and this is really dark and this is light, and you have this sort of, the light really totally activates the surface. And for me, it was, so I did a black one, a white one, and then these two, this is called actually Black Hole. The white one was called White Dwarf, and then the silver ones are asteroids. So again, there's this sort of planetary link, which for me is always there within architecture, and I wanted to bring that in there. And I wanted these architectural wall hangings really work with the construction in the middle, but also for me it was also important to have that in this sort of really physical work, really activated by life, together with the 3D real-time environment, which you can see is still here. And so when we were in Italy, we scanned the houses before I even started developing the installations, because we needed really exact metric measurements, which a 3D scan allows. And then also once the installations were in the space. And as part of Expanded Interiors, we then did with Animation as well, a digital media company in Middlesbrough, we did 2 sort of documentary environments. But for this exhibition, I didn't want to just have the 3D real-time environments as documentation. I wanted them to become artworks in themselves. And for me, it was really important not to be seduced by the possibilities and technology, and to really stick to what I found really interesting in the wall paintings. And it is for me very much how architectural drawings are used, those sort of to combine this imagined space with real space, and the sort of magic of activating a surface. And so yeah, so I wanted them to really opening up these architectures, or these drawn architectures within the wall. Here you can just see a still when the wall sort of starts opening up. And I also wanted them to make the walls transparent. So even though you don't see it, but these walls here let light through. And so the shadow on this wall is actually from the opposite wall, which as well is sort of opening up into a 3D architecture, very shallow architecture, because that's what the sort of third style Roman wall painting suggests. But the light comes through and throws these shadows of the facade. It comes almost like a facade onto the other side. So you had sort of static lights, but you also have the sunlight circling the space, which you see here a shadow from the door, from the opposing door, and which sort of runs through the whole year. So it's sometimes higher in the sky, sometimes lower, and that changes the shadows as well within the space. So I just wanted to these walls and spaces really activated. At some point you see this sort of scanner vision of the space, which is this sort of point cloud where you can walk through, and then it moves on into yeah, that suddenly the installation appears, and yeah, and again you get the different lights. You get the lights through the walls, you get the sunlight, which then also throws the shadows on the wall, which I really wanted to work in the installation as well, with the shadows. You've probably seen it of the construction in the space. Let me just see. Very important for me was that it had audio, this piece. And in Herculaneum, it's actually Fiona Anderson. She's an art historian, also a lecturer in Newcastle. But she wrote a really beautiful text for the Expanded Interiors exhibition. And so this has an extract from it, and she talks really beautiful about how histories combine, and how, yeah, sort of in this space particular, and caught between the past and the present, and how we are rarely independent structures. And I love how her text incorporates grief as well, and memory, and how that combines in history, but also she talks a lot about scaffolding. So for me, that's is a very dear text to me, and it made, yeah, for me it was clear it should be part of this, and I was really happy that she was happy for her text, or an extract of her text, to be part of it. And I love that the audio slows down the environment, so you have to stay there for a while at least. I wanted to show you a little bit about the process again. As I said, Animation, I developed this, well, Animation did develop it, but according to my ideas, but there was interesting. And I mean, that's what I kind of loved, speaking to people, and you have to, and how do you show them what you want to happen? And those, I just wanted to show you some sketches which sort of helped in showing how I wanted to open up the space. Here you see again a snippet from the environment, but in Pompeii. And in Pompeii, the audio is actually the fictional conversation between the three historical artists, the Roman wall painter and Lisitsky, who was a Russian avant-garde artist, who did a really fantastic installation, probably the first installation in 1923, the Brown Room, and then 1926, the Cabinet der Abstrakten. And then Schwitters, of course, with its Märzbau. And all these artists have very different ways of working with interior space, of activating walls. And yeah, and that's why for me, they had to come together and have this discussion, quite heated discussions at times, to sort of, it was a way of bringing very different perspectives together without saying one is false, one is right, and so on. Here I've got, hopla, sorry. I've got the image, yeah, the three. So here you can see Schwitters Märzbau, you can see the Cabinet der Abstrakten, and a fourth style Roman wall painting. I wanted to show you, to play you actually just the end of the
Art, Architecture and Life.
No, it has
Art, Architecture and Life.
Sorry.
A fictional panel discussion. Architecture. As chair of this imagined conversation, I bring to this panel
Sorry, this
three
is not what I
distinctive
wanted
historical artists. I am very pleased to welcome a woman Roman wall painter from antiquity, whose name sadly we do not know, the Russian artist El Lisitsky, and the German artist panel Kurt Schwitters. Today, our panel members will discuss their respective historical practice.
Sorry. All right. Okay. I've lost, actually, I think I now accidentally, I had it on the right time. And let me see if this one is on the right time. I don't think it is, but I have written down the minutes, so I could quickly go there. So I wanted to actually finish or play you the end of this conversation, which is also the last quote. And for me, it sort of, again, summons up why I think Roman wall painting is so interesting for contemporary practice. And again, what was really interesting in this collaboration, because I asked an actor, Mary Jane Wells, to read. Well, first I thought I'd do it myself, but then I listened to it. I thought, no way. So then Mary Jane Wells read it, and she sent me a demo to start with when I hadn't given her any instructions. And I've always, when I performed the piece in the past, I never gave these different artists different voices, because for me it's very much about the ideas behind it, and it's more a sort of, in that way, it's not like, I didn't see it like a play, but she sent a little demo, and I was sort of, to my surprise, I really loved her taking on these different voices, and I felt she's really bringing it to life. And against actually my plan, she sort of really convinced me that actually I like her really playing out these characters. And so that was a really lovely part of the process, where you think like, well, actually, I really like that. So let me just play this.
True, that must have had its consequences. Those were rumors that I don't want to confirm or deny. I believed in the socialist movement in the USSR, or I did in the beginning at least.
Sorry, I stop it because I think I should give you a very quick framework to this. So the three artists have been discussing their practices and so on, and this is towards the end of the discussion, and they are kind of talking about what they think is important for late 20s and 21st century artists. And so first we hear Lisitsky, the Russian artist, then Kurt Schwitters, and at the end, the Roman wall painter.
Police in some way. And if true, that must have had its consequences. Those were rumors that I don't want to confirm or deny. I believed in the socialist movement in the USSR, or I did in the beginning at least. I wanted to shape society and pioneer alternative ways for art to merge with life, to infiltrate life. I believe that the artists of the 20th century need to get together more internationally and develop a bigger alternative vision and visual language. An alternative approach, yes, but I don't see why bigger and louder is better than small and unpredicted. I believe that today it is more about finding ways of working that resist being appropriated by the mainstream, especially if it is about artists' inventions into architecture. It is about creating spaces that resist being repossessed by either good or bad causes. And maybe these spaces should remain hidden, secret, and covert, like those back chambers our Roman wall painters talked about earlier. I welcome ambiguity. I think that what our Roman practice brings to this discussion is firstly complexity. That is how our art articulated a whole building in a layered yet coherent way. And secondly, a trust and belief in the visual and intellectual capacities of the audience, and a recognition that challenging them is good. To finish with a motto, like my male colleagues, complexity, difficulty, and multi-layeredness is the key to the future.
So I wanted to finish with this quote, but before we open the discussion, I wanted to very, very quickly say, if you come to the exhibition, pick up the fantastic link group guide for young people. They've followed the Expanded Interiors project and have written their and designed their own interpretive guide, talking about colors, false walls, synesthesia, and so on. Don't miss it. Big thank you, and let's have a discussion.